historically been an underappreciated asset. B2B software used to be kind of, enterprise software was boring, annoying, and
it still is.
It still is. Yeah, maybe so. We're trying to make enterprise cool again. Yeah, all the attention was on consumer, but with the advent of Snowflake and the continued progress of Salesforce, I think people are like, wow, it's where the money's at.
Welcome everyone to another episode of IT Visionaries, and today we have a special guest. Whenever we have people on the venture side, I always get excited because they have a unique perspective on the tech world at large. From Scale Venture Partners, he is one of the partners at Scale Venture Partners, Eric Anderson. Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much. It's great to be here. All
right, right out the gate, we let all of our guests tell our audience exactly what you guys do. Scale Venture Partners, we know that VC firms often have different focuses. Please let us know, what are you guys focused on?
We're a Bay Area venture capital firm focused on early stage investments, mostly in B2B software.
Is there any particular reason why you choose to spend your time focusing on B2B?
It's where our background as partners comes from. And also I think it's historically been an underappreciated asset. I think, B2B software used to be kind of, enterprise software was boring, ugly, annoying, and all the kind of excitement.
It still is, by the way. It still is.
It still is. Yeah, maybe so. We're trying to make enterprise cool again, but all the attention was on consumer. But with the advent of Snowflake and the continued progress of Salesforce, I think people are like, wow, it's where the money's at.
Yeah, no doubt about it. There's usually big budgets allocated to solve big problems. It's the best way to think of it for anyone out there that's probably newer on the tech development side. One of the things that's always interesting, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, when it comes to enterprise or B2B software, there's multiple challenges. One, understanding the problem at hand, right? So it typically requires some level of domain experience that you've been there before and seen something happen. We hear about the famous story of I think like Aaron Levy at Box, right? Like he was at a motion picture studio and he figured out that this is a ridiculous way to trade files, right? Unless you're there, you won't know that that's a problem. But then there's a couple other challenges along the way, which is like scaling, trust issues. Like enterprises don't like investing in, fads. I remember filling out RFPs where they ask you like, well, how much money do you make? Like they want to know that you're big enough to support them. So when you're dealing early stage, that's so far away often from what the product is going to be. What are some of like the key tenets you guys are looking for when I'm thinking like early stage B2B? What are you looking for? Because I'm imagining when you invest in these companies, they're so far away from where they're going to be.
Right. And let me qualify early stage for our purposes a bit. We look at companies who are on the cusp of revenue or have earned their first revenue. I think the risk of a company just dramatically drops once you've kind of found product market fit, or at least you've found a couple customers, and that's one indication that gets us pretty excited. I think you nailed it on another one, which is some level of domain expertise. I think when we find people who've had this problem themselves, have wrestled with it, as opposed to someone who's kind of been opportunistically looking for a place to start a company, I think that passion is able to fuel people for the, like you pointed out, next 8 years we need in order to see the kind of exit we're looking for.
Yeah, because a lot of times during the build-up process, I remember my early stages in enterprise software is like every time you got to, let's say, a shipped feature set and you'd have a stable base of customers that were pretty happy, you inevitably run into more customers that wanted more. It was never done. You know what I mean? And it's always a big challenge, and then new business challenges. When you think of that domain expertise, what are there any particular areas where you're listening for more problems or understanding of problems? Like, how do you guys evaluate the problem set? Because, obviously that you guys have to recognize that problem set as the opportunity.
Yeah. So not only do we want, founders with domain expertise, but we'll go out and try and do our own interviewing of like prospects and customers and try and develop some empathy for the problem. The depth of the problem is almost more important than the depth of the solution in some respects. Like if this is just because you have 8 years to continue to iterate on a solution, but if there isn't a lot of something to solve, then you may run out of runway on the idea. So yes, we'll go to customers, prospects, and develop some empathy. And so part of my time is just maintaining or developing relationships with buyers of business software. I live in a world mostly of VPs of engineering, developers themselves, more on the technical side. And so I try and maintain relationships with folks building software and buying software to help them.
Obviously, everyone that comes on our show has it touches software or development in some capacity. We've seen desire to fix supply chains. We've seen desires to make DevOps better, better infrastructure tools. We've seen that. Security certainly keeps coming up over and over again in regards to like more investment there, more investment in machine learning and artificial intelligence to figure out business problems. What about you? I mean, those are obviously huge, broad categories. Is there any category specifically that you're starting to see like bubble up as like, hey, this is becoming a bigger problem for devs? Like they need more support here?
Yeah, and maybe I'll go back to your broad categories and then give you a couple specific ones. But
Yeah.
All software used to be sold on what we called on premises. It was sold as a license, and then there was the SaaS revolution for the last 2 decades, and so which is, if you bet on anything in the last 2 decades, it would have been to bet on software as a service. And so now the question is, for us, is like, is there another kind of revolution like that to watch? And one thing we're keeping an eye on is just the use of machine learning. And I know that that's, people talk about it all the time, but we actually think that we call them cognitive apps, that machine learning and artificial intelligence could represent a similar kind of broad investment opportunity. In the case of SaaS, every kind of category of software saw a new big exit. CRMs, Salesforce replaced its Siebel, and now is there kind of like an AI ML enabled CRM, or in the case of the developer stuff I look at, is there an AI or ML enabled solution for testing code, for quality assurance, for security, and I think in all those categories it kind of feels like there probably is.
Yeah, and the I can tell you that in every category we've had where there's someone who is, we just had the CTO of Ansys. They make engineering simulation software. So it's like if you wanted to build like a wing for a plane, what type of materials, which instead of going to clay modeling and putting in a wind tunnel, you can model in software, and machine learning and AI would help identify your variables and your wind speeds and all this stuff. And he was talking about the time development shrinking. In every single group that we talk to that's like that, they're all developing their internal tools. And then we also meet tech founders like outside of it, like Scale AI, and they're just building AI for AI. Like they're like, we're going to help everyone who wants to implement AI do more AI. So there's definitely a race there. And that seems like one of the big green fields where we've still just begun. The development has just begun. And I always joke with our guests about it, like, all of us have had that experience. Maybe I'll use banking software where it's like you're supposed to put in a natural language input. Like I'm going to call out Bank of America because we invited them on the show a bunch of times and they still haven't said yes. But their help app, Erica, doesn't understand anything. Like she doesn't understand. I've asked it many questions. It doesn't know what's going on.
Yes. And thankfully, the robots aren't going to take over anytime soon. Yeah, that's not a risk.
So one of the things I'm curious from your perspective, like what looks like something groundbreaking? Is that like kind of what you see, like groundbreaking innovation, or do you see like more like, hey, I think I have a groundbreaking founder. Like the way this person thinks is different than everyone else. I think this person will reach an answer before someone else. Like how do you evaluate it?
So there's certainly that. Given the stage that we invest, like I said, where we try and find things that are right on the cusp of being adopted by users, there's early revenue. And it's on the cusp of potentially exploding. That's where we often call it founder-led growth. So founders are the ones doing the sales, but they haven't quite figured out how to bring in a sales team. That's the like sweet spot for us. And so while we do get pretty excited about founders who have some vision, I think seeing that the product is being adopted is the big thing. And revenue is not always the leading indicator. It's often like how active are users in the application. If it's an open source project, like who's using it, who's excited about it. As much the chatter and enthusiasm about the product is as much indication, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at your like logarithmic growth scale behind you. I don't know if it's actually logarithmic, but I'm just calling it logarithmic because it kind of has a logarithmic curve on it. And I'm thinking to myself, because you're right, because at the early stages, That's the flat part. No one really knows that this thing's going to pop. Like the growth is very slow, and so you're looking for these key indicators. Are there any specific sectors? I'm curious about, like, you mentioned before, applications to help developers specifically. Are there any subsectors within that besides AI and ML that you start seeing there's a lot of buzz around? Any new emerging sectors that maybe the population at large isn't too familiar with?
Yeah. So let's talk about, because it's so exciting, compliance for a moment. I think in the past we haven't really worried about that. Like people just if the code builds and it like if it runs, ship it. We now live in a world very quickly where software is being regulated at
Yeah.
kind of new and unprecedented levels, starting with privacy, but increasingly people won't buy software B2B without security credentials. They want to see compliance and frameworks that you're adhering to. So there's a big boom going on for ways that can help developers and development teams kind of automatically certify that they're using good security practices, that they're staying privacy compliant. But while it sounds boring, these things drive meaningful revenue. Like you can accelerate sales. If you're SOC 2 compliant, people will buy much faster. And so if you can slap that on your software, it's a big deal.
It's like the unsexy part of the world. It's like unsexy business, like insurance. But yet, if you look around, every insurance company's huge, because it's required. No, I can totally see that in regards to compliance. What about like the people that are entering the problem? Because we kind of hinted at it before. When it comes to B2B software, it's generally people that have domain experience, so they have some type of working experience. Do you see younger entrants, like people trying to take on internships early to find the problems to come out and try to fix them? Like, do you see any type of shift in the age of the founders, or does it still require quite a bit of working experience before you find a problem to hit? And like, someone like Aaron Levy is more of an outlier.
No, I mean, we see it across the board. I have yet to see a real pattern around age. I think there are Aaron Levies. I talked to someone just out of college 3 days ago. He's got a fascinating company, and his domain expertise comes from a family business. Like he basically grew up, he and his family doing this certain thing, and so he had a natural inclination towards it out of college. And then I think in enterprise, though, you do see repeat founders and founders late in life. I think we've got somebody in their 60s who's rocking it. And I maybe as a board member, you start to wonder if like we need to think about kind of what's the long-term risk here. But for now, it's fantastic.
Oh, that's awesome. 60 and still hungry. Well, that you know what? There's a lot of people that have like predispositions to believe VCs want to look for specific characteristics. I'm glad you just threw that out the window. It's like, nah, it's all about founder-led growth. If the idea is right, if you got a little traction, doesn't matter your age.
Yeah, I mean, it just is to kind of make that more concrete. I did mention we have somebody in their 60s in the portfolio, and then also we invested in Box, so we backed Aaron Levy, seemingly as a kid, and so I think we covered the spectrum.
Yeah, no doubt about it. For that person that you just recently encouraged to pursue their passions, may I ask what category that's in?
This is the person just out of college that I was talking about. Yeah. Their family is a dental distributor. They sell, provide dentists with all the kind of raw materials they need from, chemicals, kind of consumer like materials. And apparently it doesn't surprise me. The world of distributor software is not great. So and who better to know than someone who kind of grew up in the business?
No, that's exactly it, right? If you're not from there, why would you ever recognize that there's a problem there?
And you probably do need somebody young enough to appreciate what good software might look like to kind of upend an industry that's a bit sleepy.
Yeah, because you've had maybe decades of users that are just like, well, this is just the way it is.
Right.
When you think about the pace of innovation, because obviously you're seeing how things are changing, you have a unique perspective in the, you're obviously investing in companies that are going to make it. Some of them don't, but you're still seeing how things are changing around all these portfolio companies. Where are we going towards? Like, are people, one of the big things people, for example, worry about all the time is, am I going to get replaced? Are jobs going to be increasingly more automated to the point where there's no need for people? It's been a fear for a long time. Where do you see work transforming the most? Because obviously, like in the last 2 years, we've gone from centralized work to remote work, hybrid work. Hybrid work's probably here to stay. We're introducing more AI and ML. We got things like robotic process automation that are taking away repetitive tasks. How do you envision the future of work? Like, what's that going to look like in the next 10 years?
Yeah, the concerns around automation, I'm less worried about. I think people have been we've been automating work for decades, and
That's
if we
right.
didn't, we'd all be working in factories at the moment, or even earlier, we'd all be on farms. And thanks to automation, food is much more abundant, and thanks to manufacturing, now kind of physical products much more abundant. And as long as we're able to continue to retrain ourselves for new work, we can move into things that people find more interesting. And this is what powers our kind of interest around the cognitive apps I mentioned earlier, which are the kind of the machine learning embedded stuff that will automate. Historically we automated kind of physical work, and now we're automating knowledge work. As far as like how is that going to change work? One thing to think about is where can automation happen? I think it happens at the interfaces of when work becomes digital. I mean, I guess what I mean by that is it was hard to like automate or help sellers, because sellers were in person, they were talking to people. How do you shake hands? But now we sell over Zoom, and now we can
Hmm.
have AI kind of listen into our sales calls. We can have it record our sales calls and compare every person in the team sales calls. Like now that work's digital, there's an opportunity to kind of coach, automate, help salespeople be more effective. And so you can take those digital interfaces where work gets done and kind of think of where you can plug more AI in. For developers, it's probably the pull request. That's where the work on my local machine kind of passes
Hmm.
through a digital interface to the rest of the organization. And so I'm curious to find stuff like solutions that are kind of automated at the pull request stage, generating their own pull requests, like assessing security at the pull request, all those ideas.
Yeah, we had a guest on that's kind of in a similar space. Up Hero, they are testing the code as you write the code. Right before it's shipped to the main code base, it's already testing it. Like, what vulnerabilities is this code going to create? You know, when you think about how these things are changing, and I'd love for our audience to learn a little about you yourself, because you have a really cool background. You got both comp sci and mechanical engineering in your background. And one of the fun things we looked up on your LinkedIn is people said, like, you're really good at making stuff. It sounds like you got your recommendation. You got lots of recommendations for manufacturing. So, like, this guy knows how to make stuff. Give our audience an idea of your background. You started at University of Utah. It looks like you got a BS in mechanical engineering. How did you get into the computer side? Because it looks like Stanford shortly followed.
Yeah. So I did. I always wanted to make stuff, and I still kind of identify mostly as a builder, as a maker. In college, I made a bicycle with my brother-in-law. Um, it's called a Madsen cycle. It has a big giant bucket on the back. In fact, I've got one in my garage, and I will take my kids to school and to the store in it. It's fantastic. But I think I was always also interested in computers, and I felt like there was an opportunity for maybe even bigger impact with software. And so quickly after graduating, I was working at GE Aviation, um, where things hadn't changed for 20, 30 years in some cases. And
Wow.
I was like, I think I want something more dynamic. I learned I kind of taught myself further how to code, built some, at the time, it was all about mobile apps, um, built some apps that got Amazon excited during a job interview, ended up at AWS on EC2 as a product manager. And I realized just how this was before AWS had broken out their earnings. And I was like, wow, we are just printing money. Like, this is incredible. The whole world doesn't realize that like Amazon is going to be a server company more than it's going to be an e-commerce company.
Yeah. You got recruited out of, you were based on those apps, you got recruited at AWS, or did you apply and try to get a job there?
Yeah, so I went to business school, and this was for my summer internship during business school. They came to campus, and so I kind of a mix of applying and recruiting, I suppose.
Cool.
So I just kind of like happened into the cloud. That wasn't really the plan. And then my manager left AWS and ended up at Google, where Google was kind of launching their cloud. And so I followed after business school to kind of get on the ground floor of the next big AWS was the plan.
That is awesome. So you're managing products, you're helping building cloud services. You started at Amazon, you're working on the Google, GCP lines of business. How did you end up in venture? Like, how did you get recruited to that, or how did that happen?
Yeah, it was a bit incidental. It was mostly recruited. I had spent 4 years at Google, and I had tried to kind of get myself into the most complicated, difficult parts. So I was working with a team of mostly PhDs that were doing the parallel data processing framework that is called MapReduce Elsewhere. That's kind of the ground, the foundation for data infrastructure today. Finally decided it was time for me to go work at a startup or something, and talk to my friends from business school who were in venture and about startups to try and find a great place to land. And increasingly after talking to them, it seemed like there was an opportunity to be in venture. And about that same time is when Scale came recruiting, and it just seemed like a great fit.
What was like your first? Give me an idea, like what your first assignments were at Scale, because you're currently partner. You weren't partner when you started. What would they have you? Would they have you researching? I'd love to know what you found and identified, because that's kind of cool.
Well, so I think every time you hire somebody new, you hope that they bring like fresh new ideas, right? Like you're from
Right.
industry, you've been working at these big companies. What's the next big thing? And I knew that every new public cloud deal at GCP seemed to start with BigQuery. That was the data warehouse. That was like the kind of gateway drug to the cloud, if you will. And every BigQuery deal seemed to involve like you had to bring in a vendor to help move data into BigQuery. So you'd like pull in a third-party vendor to do like some pipeline ETL work to populate the data warehouse. So I just threw out the idea that we should go find an ETL vendor. And it was about that time that I was at reInvent, AWS's conference, ran into friends who were now at Snowflake. Snowflake wasn't as big a deal then, but I asked them of kind of like their favorite vendor. They pointed me to Matillion. And after a little research, we invested in Matillion, which was probably the first deal I worked on.
That is awesome. That is for those of you guys that are not putting the pieces together. I mean, I'm going to say it, Eric. That's the equivalent of during the gold rush, you being like, "Well, we should find shovel sellers." Right? That's the equivalent, right? Like, I'm not. I don't know if I'm going to find gold, but these guys that sell shovels, they keep making money. Everyone goes to BigQuery. They're going to need to ETL their data. Let's find the biggest player in this game, or a favorite, as you suggested. That's super simple concept. Of course, hard to execute. Of course, you had to do a lot of hard evaluation to find Matillion. But that's for those listening and that didn't put that together. That's exactly what Eric did. He found the shovel sellers.
Yeah, and fortunately, I had the kind of the gold miners in my network, so I knew the folks at Snowflake, at
Yeah.
BigQuery, and we had to do a little research to figure out what Redshift was doing. And then you're right. And then we just sold a bunch. We bought the shovel sellers. Exactly. Shoveling data into the cloud. Exactly.
That is smart play. Smart play. Oh man. And for you personally, like, how about for your personal interest? Because there's also obviously you have the technical interest. You're trying to manage your fund portfolio, trying to generate as big a return as possible. How about for you personally on the consumer side? Are there any particular technologies that you're really excited about personally? You don't have to be an investor in them to be interested in it, but like where you see technology moving, where you're just like, man, this company, they're just being super innovative.
There's an unfortunate dearth of like consumers don't buy software, or they haven't
That's
historically.
true.
And a couple of people have figured out how to do it by selling content, like Netflix or Spotify, because people expect to pay for content. But folks haven't bought. Anyway, there's a couple startups where I feel like have kind of figured out. Canva is one. This is like a design app. If you want to make like a card for a friend, or like a photo, or even a presentation. They give you a bunch of free templates, and then after you get a little more complex, they start charging you. And surprisingly, people will sign up to like design little things for their friends on the phone.
It's not a small company. Canva, it's banana land. I saw the valuation on it recently was what, 40 billion. I don't know if that. I think that's the number I saw. 40 billion. I was like, what?
It turns out that if you unlock, charging random consumers a couple bucks, it's a big market because no one's ever done it before.
You're absolutely right. Most products now are layered with a software component, but as far as like pure software on consumer side, yeah, most people balk at like dollar apps. Like the average Joe sees an app for $1, like, ugh.
But some of these are signing up for subscription. Another one that I think is kind of clever is Credit Karma, which again, as a consumer app, did a great job of like solving problems for people. In their case, they figured out how to sell money through advertising, which has been the historic way of doing it. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's one that I always tell people that should check out, which, and if you don't, is, and I don't know how to replicate this, but Carfax does over 500 million in revenue a year.
Wow.
I think it's more than that, right? You think about it, they have a like, I think everybody knows if you want to find out about a used car, you have to use Carfax. And they charge you, like how they charge us like per report pulled. I think like the first report's free, right? But most people don't choose one car. They try to select between maybe three cars. And it's like each other report is like $39. And then you can have unlimited reports for, $100 or whatever the number is for a month, $100 a month. And I mean, it's true. People are always looking for cars. So they figured out a data game. I think some companies are trying to go into it now, but for most people, when it comes to buying a used car, they think I should get a Carfax. It's like ubiquitous with car buying.
Yeah. $100 saves me from getting a lemon or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So other than that, and now Canva, I don't know what else people pay for. That's just pretty much pure software.
Right. Well, it's not much, but I think there's opportunity there, although that's not what I spend my time on. Yeah.
There you go. Eric, it was awesome having you on the show. But before you go, it is time for the lightning round. The lightning round is brought to you by Salesforce Platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Eric, this is where we ask you questions outside of the world of work so that our audience can get to know you a little bit better. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. You said you're visiting Utah right now. You're from the University of Utah. So now I got to ask, are you an outdoors person?
Sure. Yeah.
What's your favorite thing to do outside?
Skiing, just to keep with the Utah trend, but there's others.
How good are you at skiing?
I like to tell people I ski the whole mountain.
So a black diamond's not a problem for you?
No, it's not a problem.
Oh, you're pretty good then, man. My only time I've been on, I've only skied like a handful of times. My friend did take me up to it and told me he judged me and said, "I think you can do a black diamond." He sent me down, and I basically fell down a mountain. I'm happy to be alive, but yeah, that sucked. So you consider yourself a builder. Besides that bicycle, have you ever built anything else?
A desk, and recently a ladder, actually.
A ladder. What made you build a ladder?
The kids wanted a trampoline, and it didn't come with like the right ladder, and so made a small 4-step ladder for them.
How about your kids? How old are your kids now?
Believe it or not, I have 4 kids, and they are ages 3 to 11.
Okay, so we have a similar range. I only have 3 kids, but I'm in that range. How would you recommend taking care of kids? Because you're currently outnumbered. You got mom, you got you. Unfortunately, you got 4 kids. You're outnumbered. How do you handle that?
The trampoline helps. They come with nets and zippers now, so you can kind of just zip it. Throw them in, zip it up. We just try and wear them out. The latest idea has been rollerblades.
How's that going?
It's going great. We lost one chin to stitches, but we've recovered and we're back on the blades.
Oh, listen, I got 2 sons with stitches under their chin. I'm guessing right under here, right under the chin line.
Yeah.
You would think. Listen, people, you would think your kids would stick their hands out when they fall, but they don't. They just kind of eat it with their face. Eric, I want to say thank you for joining us today on IT Visionaries. Thanks for sharing a little bit of what you guys look for at Scale Venture Partners. And also, of course, thank you for sharing a little bit about your personal life so that our audience can get to know you a little bit better. Hope you had a good time today on IT Visionaries.
Thank you so much. It was great.